Live tonight by Zoom to discuss all this are two political strategists. John Hart served as communications director for Oklahoma Senator Tom Coburn for 9 years. He's an author, also the founder of Mars Hill Strategies.
Now we also have Jessica Ehrlich tonight. She's a Democratic analyst and attorney specializing in public affairs. She also ran for Congress in Florida in 2012. Thank you so much for joining us, to both of you.
You've been happy to be on.
Good evening. Yeah, so John, we'll go to you first. Former President Donald Trump facing more than 90 charges now across 4 investigations. Do you think there is a coherent strategy right now within the Republican Party on how to deal with this? And if not, how would you advise party leaders?
Well, there's a coherent strategy, but there's not a very cogent or sound strategy. And look, the problem for Republicans now is that these indictments are making former President Trump more popular among primary voters, but much less popular with general election voters. And we know from the past 3 election cycles, President Trump has been a loser in each of those cycles. So, for example, in the 2022 midterms, everyone thought there would be a red wave. Well, it was a trickle. And there was actually a 7-point penalty that candidates faced if they were strongly associated with Trump. If they were endorsed by him, they underperformed, whereas candidates who fit into what we would call the normal lane overperformed. And so we're seeing all kinds of poll suggestions, even now. For example, the Virginia Governor, Glenn Youngkin, there was a poll that recently came out where he beat Biden by 7 points and overperformed Trump by 10 and DeSantis by 7. So I think what Republicans have to do is look at reality, and really it's incumbent upon the early primary voters in states like Iowa and New Hampshire to ask themselves the very tough electability question. Is that you may think Trump is being unfairly targeted. You may think there's a double standard, and there are double standards in the law, that, life is not fair. But do you really want to nominate someone who has been a loser the past 3 cycles and whose popularity continues to wane? If you really believe that Joe Biden's policies are not the best for the country, which I certainly believe, then why would you nominate someone who's the least likely to defeat Biden in 2024?
Yeah, it all really starts to crank up next week, the first presidential debate. Jessica, Trump may or may not show up in Milwaukee. So far, he's refusing to sign the RNC's loyalty pledge, which is required to make the debate stage. So how do you see that debate playing out with or without the former president there?
I think his presence will be felt whether or not he is in person live or not in Milwaukee. There's been some talk that he might even do a competing event because he would like to draw attention away from the debate. He feels he's so far ahead of everyone. I know that his team does not want him to appear, especially because there are various things. He always ends up saying things going off script when he's in a debate. It would be very interesting, though, to actually, have him on stage and see how the other participants really would go against him or not bring up all of the many failures that he has that you could attack him for. How would they differentiate themselves from Trump because he is the front runner? Are they going to take that tact or not? I mean, Tim Scott has not been taking that sort of tact from a political standpoint. A lot of them really have not talked as much about their policy. I think, DeSantis certainly has pointed to his record in Florida, but it's been very interesting on the ground so far, at least in Iowa and with early voters. Vivek has been getting a lot of attention from young voters. So are those folks that are on that stage, Chris Christie's not afraid of, going after Trump, but will they actually talk, I think, to John's point, a little bit about policy, about politics, about the economy, about immigration, about clean energy, about the climate, the various issues that are really affecting the daily lives of Americans and that do tend to get out not only voters in a general election, but the large numbers of independent voters that aren't just those folks that are voting in a primary. So it'll be very interesting sort of to see how that plays out, whether he'll be there, whether he's competing. I think, both Bret Baier and Martha MacCallum have said he's going to be on stage, whether he's in person or not.
Yeah, so following that, John, the whole idea of a debate is that ideas are exchanged, policies are proposed, and then voters decide which candidate they want to represent them. But do you think that's still the case? And what role does ideology play in the Republican run for president now?
Well, right now, the ideology and policy doesn't play nearly as big of a role as it should. Look, I started an organization to promote conservative free market environmental policy. because I believe that Republicans actually have a better agenda and message and set of policies to promote clean energy. But it's going to be very difficult for those ideas to break through when former President Trump continues to dominate the conversation. And not just that, as Republicans are allowing that to happen and perpetuating that. So, for example, when Republicans the House Republicans passed H.R. 1, the Lower Energy Costs Act, that was the same day Trump was indicted in New York. And Republicans voluntarily went off message to defend Donald Trump instead of promoting their signature policy agenda. So that's a catastrophic error. Republicans can win when we focus on policy and the size and scope of government, but we've shown time and time again the past 3 cycles that we lose when we allow Trump to be the center of conversation. Trump has displaced the party of we the people with a me the person cult of personality. So it's extremely damaging for the long-term brand of not just the Republican Party, but the Republic itself. And we need to get back to focusing on policies and ideas and solutions.
Yeah, and Jessica, following up on that, amid all the distractions of Trump's 4 indictments, how are party Democrats going to find a way to rally their base around the issues?
I mean, I think, you're seeing right now where there's a celebration of the 1-year anniversary of, Biden's signature policies to bring down inflation in the country and really working to sort of tout those successes, get them out there and break through, I think, all the noise like John was mentioning, because it's on both sides. And I think that was the challenge we saw back going to 2015, 2016. It just became so riddled with continuous barrage of information that people are getting about wrongdoing and bad doings. And there's not enough focus. There's tragedies happening around the country. There's a lot of things going on, whether it's, fires in Maui, all of these different things. There's wars in Ukraine. There are real issues and people are suffering. They have pocketbook issues going on, and being able to break through, focus on the economy, because, that's, I think, always the strongest argument when it comes down to, this weekend, Labor Day is coming up. And, gas prices are rising. How are we going to combat the argument around, that's Biden's fault, and talk more about the larger picture of what's going on, and get the sort of the national dialogue back on track to where it needs to be and away from scandal, salaciousness, and talk about the real issues that are affecting people's lives so that we do have some positive change happening in the next 4 years.
So, John, I saw you nodding. Same question to you. With the 4 indictments, how do Republicans focus on anything else?
Well, it takes message discipline. The key strategy in any campaign is repetition, and politicians have the authority to decide what message they want to repeat. And if I'm advising a candidate, I want to talk about the economy. I want to talk about energy prices. And look, even though Trump is not popular with general election voters, Biden isn't far behind in terms of unpopularity. As I'm sure Jessica knows and tracks very closely, is that Trump, according to the latest AP poll, 64% of voters don't want him to run, whereas with Biden, I think the number is about 53%. So you have 2 candidates who are deeply flawed, and I think normal voters are hungry for honest conversations about issues that they care about, the pocketbook issues, as Jessica talked about, issues of the economy. And there are people of good faith on both sides who have a different set of ideas and solutions about how to best lower gas prices. How do you deal with inflation? What do you do about the national debt? What do you do about the size of government? And I think if Republicans focus on those issues, they're going to do just fine in November. But if they continue to bow at the cult of personality of Trump, they're gonna lose not just the Republican Party, but the Republic itself.
All right, our 2 guests tonight, John.
That'll be very.
Go ahead, Jessica.
I think that'll be very interesting to see in the debate coming up, because it'll be the first debate. You've got, Brett Baer and Martha McCallum are very serious people. They know their policy. They know what's going on. And if they can ask some good questions and elicit some really strong answers from these candidates who have a very diverse background, that could be the first step in, okay, how are these candidates differentiating themselves on a policy level? How are they differentiating themselves to the voters? And is this something we can actually look forward to going forward, where we do have more discussion about what's really up? Or are they just there to try to get, seats as cabinet members or as a vice president in a Trump candidacy again? All
right, our 2 guests tonight, open conversations here on DC News Now at 7 o'clock. We got John Hart, Jessica Ehrlich, Political strategists sharing their insight. Thank you both so much.
Yeah, John and Jessica, great seeing you. Thanks again for joining us in DC News Now at 7. Hope to see you down the road.